Welcome to Tell Me About East Asia, a podcast presented by the Center for East Asian Studies at the University of Arizona. CEAS is a Title VI National Resource Center supported by the U.S. Department of Education. We assist and promote the study of East Asian languages and cultures across Southern Arizona and beyond. This episode is hosted by Dr. Scott Gregory, Associate Professor of East Asian Studies and Co-Director of CEAS. We'd also like to welcome our guest, Dr. Sandra Park, to the podcast.
Welcome to another episode of Tell Me About East Asia. I'm here today with my colleague in the University of Arizona Department of East Asian Studies, Sandra Park, an assistant professor of modern Korean history. Sandra, welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Gregory. Thank you for having me.
Maybe you could start out just telling us a little bit about yourself and your background, about your training and how long you've been at the U of A and things like that.
Yeah, that sounds great. So I actually arrived at U of A pretty recently, last fall. So this is my second year here at UA. Before coming here, I was in the DC area. I was with George Washington University on a postdoctoral fellowship. And my training in modern Korean history was at the University of Chicago. I was with the Department of History there. So yeah, I've actually spent a lot of my past decade or so kind of moving around for my training, for work and whatnot. But I'm really happy to have landed here in Tucson with U of A. It's been a really wonderful year, a couple of months so far.
Oh, that's great. And I think a lot of us have the same feeling about moving around in this business. How did you get interested in modern Korean history in the first place?
Oh, that's a great question because actually that wasn't my plan originally. So I did have this kind of desire to go into higher ed, into a PhD program early on in college. I was really eager to major in history, something that I always enjoyed. But actually, I was preparing to go into history of medieval Europe, actually. So most of my undergrad training was on medieval and early modern European history. But I think a couple of different strands came together in my pivot towards modern Korean history. I think one of the kind of important strands was, I think either in my first or second year at University of Chicago, where I also did my college, we had a guest speaker from South Korea, sociologist Kim Dong-chun, and he gave this public talk on campus. A lot of undergrads, grad students, faculty were there. And that was my first time learning about the violence of South Korean history over the decades of the Cold War. He was one of the standing commissioners for South Korea's Truth and Reconciliation Commission. So it was my first encounter with confronting violent modern history of Korea that I think in some ways I got glimpses of in my background, being in a Korean immigrant family and, hearing stories from my grandmother about surviving the Korean War, and et cetera. But it was really my first time kind of being confronted with this history. And then later in my college years, around third year, fourth year, I got really interested in North Korea and especially with the activism surrounding Korean migrants, defectors. And that was actually, I think, my most kind of immediate pathway into being interested in modern Korean history. So from that, I started taking courses. Bruce Cummings, a faculty historian at U Chicago, and it really generated a lot of questions for me. I was really struggling to understand just the relationship between North Korea, the United States, also the role that religion was playing in a lot of kind of narratives about U.S.-South Korean relations, but then also about North Korea. So I think I kind of ended my college degree with just a lot of questions that still kind of really puzzled me. And I think a lot of us relate to that, right? That's why we started the
Absolutely.
PhD journey, because we had all these questions that we wanted to kind of unravel. So yeah.
Right. So I imagine at some point in your undergraduate career, you had to change your major. Did you come in as a history major, but you changed emphases, or was it a different department?
Yes, I got a little bit lucky. So I did go into college as a history major. My concentration was medieval Europe, and then end of my junior year, I was like, I know I did all the coursework in this field, but can I write my BA thesis on North Korea? And lucky for me, the department did. They really did kind of walk the talk. They very committed to us being interdisciplinary and also just kind of for us to explore. So they actually let me do that. They let me do my BA thesis with Cummings, who would later actually be my PhD dissertation advisor. And so I got really lucky in that sense. But and also I already had Korean language fluency, so that also helped convince them. I didn't have
Right.
to, spend more years kind of acquiring Korean. So yeah, it worked out for me.
Did you find any parallels between medieval Europe and North Korea, or at least the way that you study those two different objects of study?
Yeah, I think looking back, my interest in medieval European history was it was always centered around this question of religion and power, religion and
Right.
politics, and as I think my research is on Christianity and the Cold War in the making of South Korea and U.S.-Korean relations. So I think that's a direct parallel there. I'm very
That's
much just
really interesting.
interested, yeah, in those two categories.
And so, what got you interested in researching Christianity in particular in Korea?
Yeah, so I think around the time that I was involved in the kind of activist communities concerning North Korean migrants and defectors, Christian organizations played a really big role in this field, in this area, and I think it was pretty jarring for me to have to try to reconcile kind of what I was learning in the class about Korea's very, very violent Cold War history, and then also the particular narratives about that past from the people that I worked closely with. And so that's kind of one of the questions, right, that got generated for me. And I wanted to spend more time kind of learning more to be able to think more about why is it the case that these narratives are so bipolarized? And I think for me to kind of understand that in the context of Christianity has been very influential in the history of South Korea. It's, South Korea is so interesting in that in the context of its East Asian region, right, it has a really high proportion of the population identifying as Christian. So I was trying to, I think across some different puzzle boards, but yeah, I really wanted to see what it was about the Cold War experience on the Korean Peninsula and how that might explain that kind of remarkable growth of Christianity in the country from something like, just a couple percent in 1945, less than 3%, to almost 30% by the turn of the 21st century. So I really wanted to address those two puzzles.
Right now, there's just an explosion of interest in Korean language and culture and everything amongst students. What do you want students to know about Korea that they don't know?
Oh, well, that's a big question. And let's see. I think it's really, really interesting teaching Korean history these days now because, in years past, when I would teach undergraduate students, I would ask questions like, have you heard about certain events, right? The Jeju Massacre in 1948 or the Gwangju Uprising and the violence there in 1980. And in years past, undergrad students would be like, no, I've never heard about this. But recently, because of the popularity of South Korean cinema especially box office hits like The Taxi Driver and other films that have kind of this global viewership now. Students these days, when I ask them, they're like, oh, yes, I do know about this. I heard about this through this film or through this series. And so I think for me, a lot of it is just kind of being part of the students' learning journey about understanding some of the origins of these historical events and processes, and to really try to encourage them to explore the complexities behind these histories, the contradictions. And I guess a simple one-line answer would be like to encourage them to think about, it's very complicated. It's really complex, but it is a real treat to be able to get students who already come with this kind of curiosity about the things that I want to teach them.
If you could recommend one film or K-drama to someone, what would you recommend?
I want to recommend Crash Landing on You, but I feel like everyone has already seen it. So,
You're talking to a complete novice here. Yeah.
Oh, okay, Scott. Crash Landing on You. Yeah, it's South Korean Netflix collaborative series, and it's set in North Korea today. The center of the story is this romance between a South Korean woman who's a daughter of a chaebol conglomerate family, and then a high-ranking North Korean military officer. And something I tell my students in class is that, this series is not only well made, but it reflects a particular moment in South Korea's political history. For example, a series like this that really shows and represents the everyday lives of North Koreans living in North Korea in a way that humanizes them. Not to say that there aren't problematic representations in the series, but, for a series to humanize North Koreans for both a South Korean audience and a global audience, that just could not have been possible in earlier times in South Korea's political history. So I do use that series a lot in class to teach students about the relationship between, for example, popular culture, cultural production, and history.
Absolutely. It's especially great at a time like when I said Korean popular culture is really taking over the world. So it's great if students have an opportunity to ride that enthusiasm and dig a little deeper, right? And learn something about Korea and modern Asia.
Yeah, absolutely.
So I'm assuming you're also working on a book project. Do you want to talk about that?
I would love to. Yeah. So my current book project, I've been working on it for many years now. Started as my doctoral dissertation project. The title is Anointed Citizens, Christianity, Cold War, and the Violent Making of U.S. Empire in Korea. It's a project that focuses on the Korean War years. And I think what I'm trying to explore through this project is, there is a lot of understanding about Christianity in this period, especially with many of the Christians from Northern Korea who migrate over into South Korea, and they kind of become this very influential political bloc in later South Korean history. But with my project, I'm trying to look at people who weren't part of this elite migrant group of folks who crossed over from the North. I look at kind of wartime categories of people, such as refugees and prisoners of war. And something that I'm thinking about is two groups of people. So for the refugees, I kind of look at how their experience of being rescued during the war by the U.S. military as Christian subjects, how that really shapes their process of becoming South Korean citizens once they've crossed over into South Korea. And then the other part of the book, I look at North Korean prisoners of war. So these are also North Koreans, like the refugees who would later become South Korean citizens. But in their case, I look at how their experience of converting to Christianity while being captives of the U.S. military during the war, how that process and experience kind of generates ways of claiming South Korean citizenship in the context of, a very violent civil and global Cold War on the peninsula, where if you were not able to fully convince authorities that you were allegiant or that your conversion was sincere and that you would become, a good loyal citizen of the nation state, that really could invite just immense violence onto oneself. And so, I'm trying to think about how did a Christian political subjectivity emerge during the wartime.
So it sounds like we're not so far from medieval Europe after all, right? Maybe you've got some inspiration there.
That's right. That's right. That's right. Yeah, I'm still working on that project. I'm hoping to make good progress in the next 2 years. Oh, I forgot to mention, my journey as an academic, as a historian of modern Korea really began with North Korean history. My early projects were on trying to think about Christianity, especially in the context of the North Korean Revolution. And so with this project, what's really exciting is that I get to take kind of this peninsular framework of view of some of the questions, and to also think about the role of American power in all of this too.
Right. Are there any classes that you're excited to teach in the future?
Oh, yes. So I have a new class that I'm developing, and it's going to be approved very soon. It's History of Korea through 1945. It's a 200 level class that will also be a Gen Ed, and I'm hoping to offer it for the first time next year, either in the fall or the spring. It's essentially going to be I believe the first survey course on Korean history, on the sweep of Korean history for our UA students. So I'm really excited for this class to come through and to be able to teach it.
That's right. And it's much needed and much in demand. So it's great that you'll be offering that. Well,
Yeah.
This has been a great conversation, and I'm sure everyone will be watching for the forthcoming book. And students here at U of A can look forward to exciting classes in the future. So, Sandra, thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Gregory. It was a pleasure chatting with you. And I'm really excited to be able to offer more Korean history culture courses.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening. For more information, please visit our website, ceas.arizona.edu.